I was just having some thoughts about sensitivity and PTSD. Elaine Aron has written a book, The Highly Sensitive Person, and it's all about the roughly 15% of the population that is disproportionately sensitive to the other 85%, not just in human beings, but in all species. And in her, well, I guess the biology of it is that it's a little bit like that upstream, anomaly that, when water runs down a river, there's always eddies that are going up backwards. And things like Warren Buffett, the most successful investor of all time, is a contrarian investor. In other words, that the minority, there's actually an interesting thought which says that the majority has never been correct. And I think what it points to is the fact that betting against the majority has the fastest or the most intense potential profit, because you're leveraging 85% energy that's coming this way, and you're turning it in a way to go the other way. So you've got the possibility of concentrating 85% of the energy into 15% going the other way. I'm not explaining it very well, but it's a little bit easier to illustrate when you think of a stock market crash that includes good stocks. So 85% of the market is selling, and that's driving the market way down much faster than if you're buying. If you're buying a stock and it's going up, and 85% of the market is buying that same stock and going up, as you're buying, it's going up further. And if you're a big buyer, you actually drive up the stock, particularly if you are going along with the majority. However, if 85% of the market is selling the stock and you're buying, no matter how much you buy, because you're a minority investor, you're not going to buy the stock up. It may be going down while you are buying, which is, for a good stock, when you're buying based on fundamentals rather than technical trading, that's an ideal thing and opportunity to do. And that's sometimes what Warren Buffett will do, as well as just contrarian investors. But I wanted to talk in more detail about being highly sensitive and having PTSD, because there's a way that they double up on each other in unfortunate ways, and there's a 15% chance that you are part of the highly sensitive group. I don't know if statistics show that highly sensitive people are more likely to get PTSD. I know highly sensitive people are more likely to suffer the after effects of such as a war. But I want to talk a little bit about how it plays in with me and with the co-infection of chronic fatigue. So, on the one hand, the powerlessness and the panic and the fear of PTSD is felt more intensely. So I feel that more intensely, which means that since I'm a pretty proactive and engineering type of person, I want to do something about it more intensely. You know, like I want to get things done. You know, I might respond with anger. It's like, how fucked up is this that I'm doing everything right and I'm just hit with a wave of grief out of nowhere. I mean, and nobody knows what I'm talking about. I mean, that's outrageous. Like something's got to be done. So the sensitivity of the emotion means, coupled with my responsiveness, that I'm very responsive and proactively reactive in a way that's often upsetting for other people, because most, you know, shy or sensitive types will just kind of huddle in a corner if something's happening that's over sensitizing. But I'm also a leader, and so my mind immediately goes to, wait a minute, if I'm feeling this bad with my resources and I'm a leader and I'm confident, that means other people who are sensitive are feeling this bad, and most of them are not sharing that confidence and leadership. So I've got to speak up and do something for the benefit of all, because the typical sensitive is not going to challenge group leadership or speak up about stuff, because sensitives have been so shamed. There's that common phrase, too sensitive. There's not that common phrase, too insensitive. You know, it's, nobody says, you know, I'm too insensitive, but people go around all the time saying, I'm too sensitive, as if it's something to apologize for. Now, the truth of the matter is that in human relationships and connections of any kind, engineering or otherwise, balanced sensitivity brings optimum well-being. If you go to a concert together and one person has really sensitive ears and the other person, or the typical person, has dull ears, the music will be cranked out for the average person who has dull ears. The sensitive person will feel like they're being deafened, and it'll be excruciatingly painful. I feel that a lot. The person with normal hearing will feel it's pleasantly stimulating. So a sensitive and an insensitive will not enjoy a music festival together, because the volume's going to be too low and boring for the one, or it's going to be excruciatingly painful for the other, because their inner amplifier is at a different setting. And that's the best way to look at it. It's not a moral or evolutionary thing at all. It's an inner amplifier. So one person's amplifier, or let's say 85% of the population's amplifier, is set at a 4 on a 1 to 10 scale, and a sensitive's amplifier might be set at a 7. So a stimulating degree of touch for an average person is going to be feel too rough and shocking by a 30% margin for a sensitive person. A nice, pleasant sound that's a little bit on the loud side for a normal person will feel 30% past painful, et cetera, et cetera. And so in the area of PTSD, combined with sensitivity, first of all the traumas of childhood are amplified significantly. So the need for repair and the reaction of the child is significantly louder. Now this can get into, of course, a vicious circle, because a sensitive child who feels pain much more than a typical child is going to express that pain more than a typical child, which means that they may be labeled a problem child with the insensitive parents, who have an 85% chance of not relating to that, one or both. They may also not get it and not believe it. It's like, because this doesn't hurt this other sibling, I'm not going to believe that these loud screams coming from the sensitive child are real. So I'm going to treat both children equally. But of course it's not equally. It's the difference between one child having sunburn and one not having sunburn. If you roughly put on clothes equally to the child who has sunburn and the child who doesn't have sunburn, the child with sunburn is going to scream. Now, some parents with unresolved trauma of their own will get violent because the trauma of their child is triggering the unresolved trauma of their own childhood. So you get these vicious circles where a sensitive child is brutalized as they experience it, screams, and then is hit and shouted at for screaming because it's overstimulating the parent who doesn't know how to deal with it. And then the child screams even more, gets hit again, and then just dissociates. And that, that child may have lost all trust in that one cycle, because they're going up and up and up, and they're communicating it as loudly as they possibly can, and they're not getting attention, they're not getting attending, they're not getting attunement, so they just disconnect and dissociate. I think some of this terrain ties in a little bit with autism, because you have very sensitive children that get treated normally until it's clear they have autism. And I don't want to venture too far into that. I've got Asperger's-like tendencies, but I haven't explored the fundamentals of autism as much. But I know that some of it, that there's different levels of the autistic symptoms. For example, someone who's just been humiliated a lot and abused a lot can be very shy and inward and overstimulated and not want to be touched. And people who are highly sensitive, who are treated normally, may also go into that kind of reactivity of, it's so exquisitely painful to connect in the typical chaos and noise of a modern world that it becomes, they get paranoid about engaging, which further overstimulates them because it's now paranoia, which is frightening. And then they've got all the chaos and noise that is frightening. And there's just this endless loop. And it's really important to get inside the infant and their mind in a situation like this, because let's say that you're a child and it starts off that things are too noisy. There's violence and stuff on TV, and it's just distressing. Maybe it has started even earlier in the womb, some of the environments that for a very sensitive person, it's distressing. And then you start communicating your distress, which stimulates your body. If you cry, if you shout, it stimulates your body, and no one's attuning to that. No one's tuning in and really seeing you. Now you've got the continual distress that you're being ignored about, plus the new stress of your own communication. And then the person responding to that, if they respond, may do so without attuning to your level of sensitivity. So maybe they poke you or stick a big face in your thing or shake you. So now they haven't turned off the TV, or they haven't turned off the source of pain, but now they're adding to it. And one can see in this kind of a pattern that it spirals forward and snowballs like this. It's a snowballing effect where it starts out, the environment is not sensitively attuned. Then you start adding to the stress with your crying, and the parent adds to that stress either by not responding and exhausting you and adding a new stimulation, or by overreacting without doing the other. Now you've got 3 times the issue. Now you may start to act out in some other way to kind of communicate, or shake your head to try and kind of tune it out. And then your parent misreads that as something else and adds some new stimulation. You can very quickly see how that might emerge into this pattern of more of an autistic temperament of, I don't want to touch, I don't want anyone near me. It's too much. Just the idea of people getting close, it's too much. And don't do that, don't do that. So how much of that is biological? How much of it is simply unattuned sensitivity snowballing? I don't know. But I do know with PTSD that there's a lot of that kind of snowballing type effect for me in daily life. And I'll give you some examples. So so many different things. So because I'm sensitive and I'm stressed, I don't know when I can get to sleep. But I do know that once I do get to sleep, I can't put pressure on it if I want a good sleep. So a typical thing is I might be traveling and think, oh, I'd like to go to, I was in the Philippines, so I'm called stay with that now. So I'm in Panglao Island. I think, oh, it'd be nice to go over to Cebu, to Cebu tomorrow. I look at the boat schedule. I see one leaves about 3 p.m. I say, good, because no matter when I get to sleep, I'm going to wake up before 3 p.m. So that's kind of safe, and it takes the pressure off. So I'm already compensating and organizing things based on that. Then the noise in the hotel of hardwood doors slamming, everyone startles me. It not only startles me into this terror, I then get angry that I've been terrified. And I start grousing, those, fucking hotel. why don't they put foam on the doors? Why, you know what? Da, 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 da. And so this amps up my brain, and then I can't, you know, get to sleep. And I'm revved up from all this, you know, sensitive, and then bang, another door, and, you know, up again, bang, another door. And I'm getting angry. But because I'm highly sensitive and I'm with a sensitive lover, my mind now goes over to her. It's like, what's it like for her to be with someone with PTSD who's so reactive? It must be scary for her. And I want to reassure her, but I'm too tired. And I feel grief that I'm too tired. And I just feel lonely that no one gets it. Like, I really want to be a kind, sensitive partner, but I'm all revved up from these, you know, trigger points. So then I finally, you know, have breakfast. I have a sensitive diet because I have a sensitive body. So I call in the order. I'm not dealing with sensitive people. And so I say, make sure it doesn't have this, this, and this, and the other. And they repeat the order, but they don't say anything about the allergies. And I say, did you write down the allergies? It's like, yeah. And I say, okay, tell me. And they say, no, this. And I said, no, that's not right. You know, so I'm getting worked up again, this time around my body, to protect my body so that I don't have to deal with the stress of an allergy, plus weak sleep, plus feeling grief that I'm not as kind as I'd like to be in some of these situations, plus my aggravation that people aren't paying attention, plus my sadness at how reactive I am to the aggravation. And it's so much to process stimulation-wise, because the sensitivity both makes me more reactive, but also makes me more conscious, and it matters more to me, the impact I'm having on others, which stresses me out further, which means I have more negative impact on others, which I'm aware of, and which is painful. It's one of the most lonely and miserable aspects of this dynamic for me, is being hyper-attuned, watching people's faces. That's part of my sensitivity, is I have a really good sense of what people are feeling. And when I'm hurting this much and trying this hard, I don't want to be labeled as an asshole. I don't feel like an asshole. I feel like I'm slogging through mud or water, you know, with a desperate effort to get through, and one person after another is making it harder to get to that destination, and no one's getting it, and I'm all alone in this, and people are judging me right and left, and it feels miserable. So I feel all this more than normal, which is depressing, which further reduces my energy on top of the chronic fatigue, which is all this hyper stress without release. So I've got depression, low energy, plus chronic fatigue, low energy. And I see it, and I feel so much grief about it. And if I talk about it, that's a new source of stimulation. And if people don't understand it, it's then a further source of loneliness or depression. And then it's interrupted in the modern life. Like, I get into this, you know, just deep depression state around this, and someone takes a phone call, which immediately triggers and shocks me, and I feel abandoned, and then I feel overwhelmed by that, and I feel, you know, I just, fuck this modern life. I feel outraged. And then even if I tone that down 80% and express some impatience, it's like, I just feel grief. So then I get to the ferry, and they play a violent movie while I'm trying to rest from all this overstimulation in the ferry. And then there's no place in the ferry where there are not speakers of this violent action movie. It's like, I asked for a ferry ticket. I didn't ask for a ferry ticket with a PTSD stimulating action movie. I complain. They say, we have to play this movie for the passengers. I said, no, you don't. My ticket doesn't say, violent action movie or movie at all. It says ferry seat. And I'm now trapped here for 3 fucking hours with one trigger after another where I'm trying to come down from all this. And so I complain. And then I'm judged, like, who's this idiot complaining about the movie? And that hurts. And they say they'll do something. But being insensitive, that just means they're going to ignore me. So I have to complain again. So then I have to repeat myself as that gets shuffled up to management, and this and that. And then I have to get creative. It's like they can't stop the movie. So I say, how about a kid's cartoon? That finally works. Then I have to listen to a kid's cartoon, but it doesn't trigger the PTSD in the way shooting does. And so what I'm wanting to illustrate, which I've understood this for a while, and so this is mostly for those of you who know a sensitive person or who are sensitive or who have a sensitive child, is the way that this snowballs in this endless hell. Because the more insensitive the environment, the more you have to overstimulate yourself doing more than anyone else to control the environment. Like, I don't get to rest in my seat. First, I have to be bombarded with a PTSD stimuli. Then I have to argue with 3 people for 15 minutes. Well, that's overstimulating. While the action movie is playing. And then I get to feel like a weirdo or a jerk for making such a fuss, because that's the vibe I'm getting from 5 people who are all glaring at me for making such a fuss about this. And I don't want to make a fuss. I don't want anyone glaring at me. I don't want to make a fuss. I don't want to be surprised. I don't want action movies. I want a nice, peaceful ferry ride. But I don't have that choice. I am surprised. And when I'm surprised over and over and over again, I may have to have 5 confrontations a day. And I'm exhausted. I don't want to be talking with any of them. And at each point, I'm so exhausted and so tired that I feel despair. It's like, oh gosh, not another thing. And then nobody understands that. Nobody can empathize with this because I'm in this distinct, unregistered, and ignored minority. Nobody's picking a movie for people with PTSD. Nobody's picking a movie for sensitives. So there's 2 things that people don't understand. And the real issue is I know I'm invisible. I mean, this is the real loneliness, is knowing that even if I win these battles, I don't win the war, because it keeps going on, 1. And 2, nobody gets it. So nobody's empathizing with this snowballing of endless hell. And this is why I think people commit suicide, is they're in this loop, they realize there's no way out within this culture, and they want out, and it's much easier to die. So I hope this provides a platform for empathy, that I see you, if you're in this category, that really sucks, and brings compassion and awareness to this whole dynamic. Thank you for listening and for understanding.